The worst kind of passenger just turned my flight into a full-blown drama. A self-proclaimed VIP decided she didn't need to follow the rules and almost forced her way into the cockpit. Her excuse? I'm too important for this nonsense. What she didn't know was that I wasn't just another passenger. I was the air marshal, and she was about to find out how bad her timing really was. But let me start from the top. The air in LAX's terminal felt heavy, stale. A cocktail of jet fuel, disinfectant, and recycled anxiety. I sat at gate 72B, half asleep in a scuffed-up chair, looking like just another road-weary traveler trying to survive a red-eye. Hoodie pulled up, sunglasses still on even though it was long past dark. To everyone else, I was Thomas Reed, an average consultant on his way to another spreadsheet-filled Monday in Denver. In reality, I was Federal Air Marshal Thomas Reed, and my job was making sure 180 strangers in a sealed metal tube reached their destination safely. This route had pinged our system for elevated activity. Nothing specific, just a pattern. Too many delays, more passenger altercations than usual. A statistical ripple, that's all it takes to put someone like me on the manifest. Usually it's nothing dramatic. A drunk salesman, a kid kicking seats, someone arguing over a recline button. You watch, you wait, you blend in. My college buddy Eric, the kind of guy who gets excited about teaching middle school civics, thinks my work is all car chases and gunfights. Truth is, it's mostly long silences and subtle reads. The real danger isn't loud, it's patient. You spend hours learning to see the small things, a nervous twitch, a forced smile, a voice that trembles for reasons words don't show. And then she arrived, her name, as I'd later find out, was Karen Tillman. But you didn't need a name to recognize the type. She came through the gate like a thunderhead, her energy changing the pressure in the room, loud, theatrical, and fully aware of her audience. Her phone was mounted on a glittery pink gimbal, lens locked on her as she marched through the crowd. "Can you believe the incompetence at check-in?" she declared, broadcasting to whoever was unlucky enough to be tuned in. "They weighed my carry-on." My carry-on? I've flown 1,000,000 miles, I know the rules better than they do. The performance was flawless. Every pause rehearsed, every sigh exaggerated for digital applause. A few people looked up from their screens, rolled their eyes, and went back to pretending she didn't exist. The rest kept their heads down. Nobody wants to engage with a storm that thinks it's a spotlight. An older man across from me whispered, "She rehearsing for a play?" "Off-Broadway," I said. He smirked. "Hope it's a short act?" "Depends on the audience." Phones were already raised. Cameras pointed. Her followers would eat this up. I'd seen her kind too many times. People who treat public spaces like their personal stage. Rules weren't obstacles. They were insults to their imagined royalty. My uncle used to say, "Some folks think the world's just a movie about them, and the rest of us are extras who forgot our lines." The boarding announcement came for Group 1, and she sprang into action. Karen lunged forward, her rolling bag a battering ram, cutting off an elderly couple without so much as a glance. She flashed her ticket like a royal decree and strutted down the jet bridge. I waited with Group 2. Blending in, that's the art. Nobody remembers the quiet man in the gray hoodie. On board, the usual mix of stale air and disinfectant hit me. Flight attendants smiled with that tired precision that comes from years of fake pleasantries. I nodded back and took in the layout. Karen had claimed 1C, first class, aisle, prime stage view for her live stream. Her camera was set up, still rolling. She was mid-complaint about not being offered a pre-departure drink yet. "I mean, what's the point of status if there's no service?" She barked. I had 2A, the aisle seat right behind her. Perfect position, full sightline of the galley and cockpit door, close enough to intervene in seconds. As I passed, my duffel might have brushed the air an inch from her shoulder. She turned, laser-focused, eyes scanning my hoodie, jeans, and sneakers like she was assessing my worth. "Oh, great," she said loudly, making sure the entire cabin and her viewers heard it. "People like you don't usually sit in first class. I hope you know how to behave." Her followers would love that. Before I could react, the older woman she'd shoved earlier leaned forward. "Sweetheart," she said dryly, "he looks cleaner than your soul." Her husband chimed in, "And better shoes." I didn't smile, didn't frown, just met Karen's gaze for one cold, flat second and then looked away. My job wasn't to win arguments. It was to vanish into the background until I needed to appear. Inside, though, I felt that familiar pulse of irritation, the kind that whispers, "Say something," but I didn't. Not yet. The seatbelt clicked. My mind shifted gears. People like her always made me wonder. What actually makes someone believe they're untouchable? Is it money, status, followers, or just delusion refined by repetition? She thought she was above rules. She had no idea what seat 2A really was. The plane door hadn't even been sealed, and she was already the biggest variable on board. The spark waiting to light a fire in a pressurized cabin. I was the extinguisher. Then came the soft ding, the call light. Leah, the purser, moved down the aisle. Calm, professional but alert. I knew her. We'd worked this route before. A veteran who could keep her cool when everyone else melted down. She stopped near my row, eyes glancing casually toward me while addressing the woman beside me. "Mr. Reed," she said pleasantly. "Can I get you a pre-departure water? Still or sparkling?" That was the code. A phrase buried so deep in our manual it might as well be folklore. Every air marshal knows it. Her question wasn't about water, it was about identification. "Still's fine," I replied evenly. "Long day." The corner of her mouth twitched, the silent acknowledgement. "Message received, of course," she said softly and moved on. No one else noticed. It was just two people discussing a drink. But now she knew who I was, where I sat, and that she wasn't alone if things went south. I took out my phone, pretending to scroll, while my brain built the map. Sightlines, exits, choke points. 2A gave me the perfect view of the cockpit and galley. If someone moved toward that door, I'd see it before anyone else. My eyes moved through the cabin, not as a traveler, but as an analyst dissecting the room. Row 3D, big guy, military posture, calm eyes, clean hands. Asset. Name him Marcus. Row 3C, sweating, jittery, eyes flicking back to Karen every few seconds. Associate, liability. The young flight attendant, Rory, was already overwhelmed, apologizing to Karen for things that weren't his fault. Weak link, easily manipulated. Every flight is a new equation filled with unpredictable variables. My job is to solve it before the numbers explode. Most nights that means landing without anyone noticing I was ever there. But tonight the variable had a pink gimbal, a live audience, and a god complex. And we hadn't even taken off yet. I thought about Dave, 30 restless teenagers staring blankly at him every day, convinced history was just a list of dead men in old clothes. He wrestles with that kind of arrogance constantly, though in smaller doses. He once told me the trick isn't to overpower them. It's to find the lever, the one thing that matters more to them than their own pride. For a kid, that might be a grade or a spot on the varsity team. For Karen, I had a feeling her weakness was her audience. Her entire sense of power came from the gaze of others. The image she projected was her armor, and her cage. She couldn't violate her own performance rules without breaking the illusion that kept her untouchable. I leaned back, adopting the look of someone too tired to care, but every muscle was coiled tight beneath the calm. The cabin wasn't just a row of seats to me anymore. It was a chessboard. The captain, sealed behind the reinforced door, was the king. The queen sat in 1C, loud, confident, dangerous. The ex-military man in 3D was my knight, steady, decisive. The nervous one in 3C, a pawn, unpredictable but useful. And Leah? She was my rook, running the board from the galley with quiet authority. The flight hadn't even left the ground yet. For now, we were still tethered to civilization by that slim jet bridge. But once the door sealed, we'd become a world unto ourselves. No backup, no easy exits. I had my map. My pieces were identified. And my problem was still the woman in 1C, a woman who believed her own legend. The pre-flight announcements rolled out. That soft, practiced lullaby of safety rules nobody listens to. I listened to every word. The real test always happens in the air, when the outside world fades and help is 20 minutes away. The jet bridge pulled back with a moan. We were no longer a room in a building. We were a capsule. That's when people like Karen start to shift. On the ground, she could still be removed. A gate agent, security, someone else's authority. But now, as the engines hummed and the door locked, she understood the hierarchy had changed. And that realization made her reckless. As we taxied, she unbuckled, reaching for the overhead bin. "Ma'am," Leah said smoothly, already at her shoulder, "you need to remain seated for taxi, takeoff, and landing." Karen waved a manicured hand. eyes still on her phone, which was live streaming the whole thing. "See this?" she said into the camera. "This is the kind of power trip you deal with. I just need my hydrating spray. The air on these flights ruins your skin." Leah didn't waver. "Ma'am, it's federal regulation. Please sit down and fasten your seatbelt." Karen finally turned, her expression sharp and cold. "Do you know who I am?" 2 million followers. One post from me and this airline's stock dips. Now are you going to let me grab my mist, or should I make this public?" A gate agent appeared, delivered a formal misconduct warning, and the threat died, at least outwardly. The door sealed and the tug began to push us back from the gate. That was the first test. She'd prodded the system, looking for weakness, using her social status as a weapon. The man in 3C folded into himself like a scolded child. Rory, the young flight attendant up front, looked out of his depth. But Leah stood her ground, steady, professional. "I understand you're frustrated, ma'am," she said, "but these rules exist for everyone's safety, including yours." From where I sat, I played the possible outcomes in my mind. If she refused again, Leah would report to the cockpit and the captain would have to decide, return to the gate or proceed. Turning back meant paperwork, delays, embarrassment. Some captains fold to convenience. I hoped this one wouldn't. If Karen won here, she'd test more later. Boundaries crumble in sequence. Leah didn't yield. "Ma'am, please sit down." The please was courtesy. The tone was command. For a long moment, Karen stared her down. Engines idled, a low growl beneath the tension. Finally, with an exaggerated sigh meant for her viewers, she dropped into her seat. "Fine," she said loudly. "I'll just let my skin rot because of your stupid little rules." She buckled up with theatrical aggression. Leah gave a curt nod and walked back to the galley. For now, crisis contained, but the battle lines were drawn. Karen had found resistance. She'd have to change tactics. The plane taxied, turned, and the captain's calm voice filled the cabin. "Cabin crew, prepare for takeoff." Engines roared, pressing us into our seats. And then, lift. That subtle, impossible moment when the ground falls away and gravity surrenders. We were airborne. Sealed off, the world outside gone. From now on, everything that happened would be decided in here. Karen had lost round 1, but she wasn't the type to retreat. People like her don't accept defeat. They rewrite the script. The face mist was never the issue. It was a rehearsal for control. She'd test again. As the city lights vanished beneath us, she started typing furiously on her phone, crafting the narrative. Poor, mistreated Karen, victim of airline tyranny. She was building the justification for whatever came next. When the seatbelt sign finally chimed off, I felt the shift. The opening act was over. The mid-game had begun. The first hour passed in deceptive calm. Beverage service, the cabin's ritual of normalcy, rolled out. Karen accepted a glass of champagne like royalty, humoring a servant. She sniffed the rim, checked for smudges, took a dainty sip. Her phone kept recording as she critiqued the service and the quality of the complimentary snacks. When Rory moved on, she slipped out a polished silver flask and a small pill bottle, dosing herself between takes. Not airline stock and her own supply, I stayed on water. Hydration and awareness, the only allies that matter in the air. My body relaxed. My focus didn't. Karen kept sending signals to the man in 3C. Subtle, too subtle for most to notice. A glance, a tilt of the head, a quick phone check. Then another. They weren't strangers. They were syncing their timing. My pulse ticked up. A lone troublemaker is manageable. A team is something else entirely. Outside, we crossed into the black desert below. Lights long gone. That's when it started. A staccato series of call chimes from the back. Not one, not two, a frantic burst. Ding, 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 ding. Rory hustled down the aisle, Leah right behind him. I leaned into the aisle, eyes following their movement into the coach section. A shout followed. "Is there a doctor on board?" "Someone's having trouble breathing." The classic line. Maybe genuine. Maybe not. But the timing was too perfect. I turned back toward Karen. She hadn't even glanced back. She just sat there sipping champagne, that faint smile cutting across her face like a blade. She'd been waiting for this. This was the distraction she'd engineered, the chaos she needed. Then the captain's voice broke through the tension, calm and deliberate. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a bit of turbulence ahead. Please fasten your seatbelts." The plane began to sway, a rhythmic, uneasy roll. Not dangerous, but unsettling, just enough to stir anxiety. Perfect cover. Leah's voice came over the PA, professional and steady. We have a medical emergency in row 28. If there's a medical professional on board, please press your call button. Someone did. Leah and Rory started moving the beverage cart back to clear a path. That's when the man in 3C stood up. I need to use the restroom, he muttered, eyes darting. Sir, Leah called, the seatbelt sign is on. Please remain seated. It's urgent, he said, sweat glistening on his forehead. He wasn't a good actor, and just like that, the game began. He shoved past her, heading straight for the forward lavatory beside the cockpit door. From the rear, the junior attendant pushed the second service cart forward at the same moment. The plan was clear now, a pincer. The staged medical in the back would draw crew attention in one cart. The nervous man locking the front lavatory gave a reason for someone to be at the nose. Two carts converging in the cabin would clog the aisle, pinning crew and cooperative passengers toward the rear. Elegant in its simplicity, and lethal in a confined tube of metal. A kid in 4A tugged his mother's sleeve. Is this like the safety video? His mom didn't smile. It's like the part they cut out. The kid nodded solemnly. They should never cut this part. The turbulence built, the airplane beginning to buck with increasing insistence. The pieces slid into place exactly as she'd designed. I stayed seated, pretending irritation at the chop, but my pulse had climbed and my senses were razor sharp. I watched the jittery man secure himself inside the forward lavatory. I watched Karen lift another careful sip, the portrait of unruffled entitlement. She was the director. The cabin was her stage. With the aisle clogged, the crew distracted, and most eyes glued to the commotion aft, only mine remained fixed forward. She'd carved a pocket of manufactured chaos, and now she was ready to exploit it. The fainting stunt and coach provided the cover. The cart jam supplied the choke, but the question spinning in my head wasn't whether she would act. It was what her real target was. Always the cockpit door. Always. Her motion was smooth, practiced. She eased out of her seat, clutching an empty flute, drifting toward the galley as if she only sought a top-off. Rory was occupied farther back with the faux medical. Leah was shepherding things from the middle forward. For a heartbeat, the galley was underused. That was the opening Karen had engineered. Rory popped up for a moment and she moved like a strike. Refill or I will have your name, she snapped. Rory's eyes found Leah's retreating back. He swallowed and stepped away. Karen's smile said she'd just advanced a pawn. I didn't flinch, but everything in me was watching. In the reflection of the darkened window, I caught her actions in a warped fisheye. A woman pretending to steady herself in turbulence while her fingers scanned the galley. Her gaze snagged on a small crew bag next to the purser's jump seat, Leah's personal effects and the galley service key. The cockpit is protected by keypad and bolt. A service key won't open it, but keys move people, unlock cabinets, make access easier. My training screamed at me to intercept the motion. Protocol screamed back louder. No reveal without an overt act. Grabbing at a galley key is suspicious but not yet criminal. Exposing myself too soon risked escalation or denial, and I had to stop the threat with the least upheaval to the other passengers. So I watched. Karen bent as if to retrieve something from the floor. Her hand flicked out, quick, practiced, a lift that belonged in a subway pickpocket's playbook. Her fingers grazed the bag. I was halfway out of my seat, coiled to spring, when Leah stepped into the galley like she'd heard a discordant note in a familiar song. Can I help you, ma'am? Her voice was ice, and she was already across the threshold. Karen snapped her hand back and straightened, putting on the flimsiest mask of innocence. Oh, I thought I dropped an earring, she lied, the pitch too high. Just getting some water. Leah's eyes cut to her bag and then back up. The accusation hung unsaid and heavy. Leah had seen the reach. Karen knew she'd been caught. The back of the plane drama still simmered, but the real front line was now this tiny, claustrophobic galley. Leah didn't hesitate. The seatbelt sign is on, she said, low and dangerous. Return to your seat immediately. For the first time, the imperious mask on Karen's face flickered with something raw. Maybe fear, maybe the humiliation of being thwarted. She shot Leah a look that could have been venom or disbelief, then spun away and stalked back to her row, fury already lighting her thumbs on the phone. Phase 1 had failed. She hadn't walked off with the key, but the nervous man was still trapped in the lavatory. The aisle still jammed. The diversion still held. This was not the end, only a setback. I eased back into my seat and exhaled without realizing how long I'd been holding my breath. Leah's reflex had saved the galley access. Her awareness had just climbed several notches in my book, but Karen's exposure to the crew's gaze changed the equation. People who think they're invisible don't cope well when someone else removes the curtain. Thwarted, she would get louder, riskier. If she couldn't get the key, brute force was the only remaining avenue. The quiet con had given way to something far more dangerous. A noisy escalation. The pilot's voice cut through the cabin then, steady and clinical. "Folks, tower reports some severe turbulence ahead. We're going to try to climb above it. Please remain seated and secure." He didn't sound theatrical. The word severe is never casual. The aircraft gave a brutal lurch. Not a polite dip, but a stomach-sickening fall that stole breath. A collective gasp rose and the cabin filled with raw animal noise. Outside the windows was simply dark. We had shoved into angry air. The cart in the galley, already wrestled into place, tore free of its restraints. It slammed into the forward bulkhead with a metallic scream. A bottle perched on the top shelf went airborne, hung for the split second that always feels twice as long, then exploded against the galley wall. Glass shattered with the violence of a pistol crack. Red wine arced in a surreal spray across the aluminum. The smell hit like sweet sulfur. Wrong and sudden. A jagged shard lay on the floor, the neck of the bottle, thick and wickedly sharp. It was a crude blade, a dangerous instrument in the tight geometry of an airframe. Karen's face changed in a single heartbeat. Frustration and fury melted into a cold surgical focus. The turbulence had gifted her the missing element of her plan, a weapon. Where before she had relied on trickery and distraction, now she had a blunt instrument that could intimidate, wound, or be used to force a way forward. Leah, strapped into her jump seat, went pale but kept her composure. Her eyes sliced to the broken glass and stayed there. Rory was out of sight aft. Marcus sat braced and unreadable, and the nervous partner remained locked forward. The whole cabin had frozen between the violence outside and the new sharp threat on the galley floor. In an aircraft, anything that might be fashioned into a blade is the single most dangerous variable. And in that moment, the shard was the most dangerous thing in the sky. Karen's plan had morphed from covert deception into imminent open violence. She wasn't sneaking anymore. She was going to force her way in. The plane shuddered violently, harder than before. Lights flickered, and for a heartbeat, darkness swallowed the cabin entirely before the emergency lights sputtered to life, casting a ghostly dim glow. In that brief void, I saw her shift. Unbuckling with lightning speed under the cover of the drop, she was halfway out of her seat, eyes locked on the jagged shard. She was going for it. The balance of power had flipped. What had been a battle of rules and authority was about to become purely physical. Before, her confidence came from her followers. Now it came from a weapon within reach. Turbulence no longer hindered her. It became camouflage. Everyone else was frozen, strapped in. The crew trapped. The plane, a sealed box of fear. Only I could stop her. The seconds contracted. She was unbuckled. The shard gleamed on the floor. Her accomplice hovered near the cockpit. This was the defining moment. As she lunged, my mind cleared. I had 5 seconds to act before catastrophe. The lavatory door slammed open. The nervous man exploded out, desperation written across his sweat-streaked face. He wasn't returning to his seat. He barreled into the cockpit door, hands clawing, shoulders smashing against the reinforced metal. It didn't budge. The door was steel. He screamed, a thin, high-pitched wail. "Let us in, now!" Simultaneously, Karen scooped up the broken bottle from the floor with alarming speed. She gripped it like a dagger, the jagged edge catching the dim light. Glass, not steel. Intent, not raw power. The aisle was her domain. She guarded it dual-pronged. First-class passengers recoiled, fear of turbulence giving way to the immediate horror of a violent threat. Leah, strapped into her jump seat, could do nothing but watch. There was no room for subtlety. I moved. The plane lurched again. Momentum carried me as I vaulted across the aisle, landing between her and the cockpit. My body was a barrier. She sized me up. "Security in a hoodie?" I quipped. "Budget cuts." Louder now. "Federal Air Marshal." The words cut through the chaos, practiced, precise. I held up my badge for visibility, letting Leah and the rest see the authority behind the words. Karen froze, disbelief flickering across her face. The gray, ordinary man from 2A wasn't supposed to matter. That pause bought me the instant I needed. The aisle behind me needed a guard. I locked eyes with Marcus, the ex-military man in 3D. No hesitation. You, I barked, block the aisle. Nobody moves past you. He nodded sharply, planting himself like a wall. No theatrics, no smiles. Just a human barrier. The cabin behind me was secure. The nervous man still hammered at the cockpit. They won't listen. He shrieked at Karen. Do something! Karen snapped from shock. Knuckles white, she raised the shard. You're not real, she hissed. Move aside. She lunged, not at me directly, but toward the cockpit, trying to bypass my position. The plane jolted violently. I stayed light on my feet, letting the motion work for me. She was sloppy, fueled by rage and adrenaline. I didn't need strength. I needed control. Her weapon was secondary, and it was her hand that mattered. Intent is the real threat, and hers was clear. Passengers screamed. Chaos had replaced order. Karen was poised to strike. I became the final line. As she swung, I closed the gap, forcing contact. In the narrow fuselage, you don't retreat. You dominate range. I sidestepped her wild slash, clamped down on her wrist, holding the glass. My thumb pressed into the nerve cluster on the back of her hand, fingers locking around the wrist. Pain shot through her arm. Shock widened her eyes. Grip faltered. You can't, she gasped. I can, I said, twisting her wrist into a clean lock. Drop it. The shard hit the floor. I kicked it out of reach. Leah passed me a bio bag. I scooped the glass into it, sealed, and noted the time. Evidence beats rumor, I said. On your knees, I ordered. Her only choice. She sank, whimpering. Less than 3 seconds. Her partner, still pounding the cockpit, froze at the sight. Sir, to the floor now. His resolve crumbled. Without her driving him, he was just a terrified man. He slid down, hands on his head, sobbing. Immediate danger neutralized. I pulled out soft flex cuffs. Leah, I called. She was ready, calm, moving once turbulence eased per SOP. She grabbed more cuffs. I restrained Karen, cinching plastic tight. She struggled, spat threats, but couldn't rise. I looped the seatbelt through her cuffs. The chair became part of the containment. Secure. We did the same for her partner. Side by side, first row, safe, restrained, and immobilized. The cabin watched, stunned. Fear and relief intermingled. A suited passenger raised a hand. Refunds? Leah quipped. We're giving you life. Laughter rippled forward. A kid in 4A gave me a thumbs up. 10-10, he said. I nodded. Safe landing and only rating that counts. I scanned the cabin. No injuries. Crew intact, cockpit secure. I keyed the galley intercom. This is the onboard Federal Air Marshal. Situation under control. Remain seated with belts fastened. Flight crew safe. We'll be on the ground shortly. Leah nodded, grateful. Marcus stood guard, nodding back. The flight's quiet hero settled into his seat. Adrenaline ebbed, replaced by bone-deep fatigue. The fight was done. Now came the real challenge, getting everyone on the ground safely. I picked up the flight deck phone in the galley, dialing the emergency code. The captain answered on the first ring. His voice was tight, clipped. Status? Marshal Monk, I said calmly. 2 subjects tried to breach the cockpit. Both are secured in seats 1A and 1C. Cabin is secure. No injuries. Weapon neutralized. A long exhale came over the line. Copy, Marshal. We're declaring an emergency and requesting priority landing in Denver, about 20 minutes out. Authorities are prepped at the gate. Stand by for rapid descent. Understood, I replied, hanging up. 20 minutes. I had to keep the cabin calm for 20 minutes, while the plane executed what amounted to a controlled dive. I turned to Leah. He's coming down fast. Prep the cabin. Full compliance. No exceptions. She nodded, professional focus snapping back into place. Fear had given way to precise determination. She relayed orders to the crew over the intercom. The descent began sharply. The nose pitched down, engines throttled back. The sensation was unmistakable. We were dropping fast. Anxiety rippled through the passengers. I grabbed the PA microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Federal Air Marshal. We are executing a standard emergency descent. Pilots are in control. Stay seated, seatbelts tight. Eyes on the crew, I repeated it twice. Their attention had to be on my voice, not the sinking feeling in their stomachs. Leah's team moved like clockwork, checking belts, securing the galley. They were the thin, brave line between order and panic. I remained standing in the aisle, a visible anchor of authority. Questions came. Should we pray? Will we die? Can I text my mom?
I answered simply, calm grounding.
Laughter rippled at a question about snacks. Small human moments, they helped. Karen Tillman predictably attempted to reignite chaos, spewing curses, threats, and claims about her followers and lawyers. I leaned down, close to her face. My tone was low, controlled. One more word before we land, and I'll add interfering with the flight crew and assault on a federal officer to your charges. 20 more years. Your choice. Her mouth snapped shut. Hatred burned in her eyes, but she stayed silent. Real consequences had pierced her shield of untouchability. The ground rushed toward us. Denver lights glittered below. The landing was firm, smooth, and the pilot nailed it. We taxied to an isolated gate, met by a wall of flashing red and blue. Tactical teams, not airport cops. FBI and local law enforcement in full gear. 2 agents approached me. I showed my credentials. Marshal Monk, subjects are in 1A and 1C, they're yours. Good work, Marshal. We'll take it from here. Karen and her partner were uncuffed and fitted with steel restraints. My hoodie drew a glance from an agent. I shrugged. Camouflage for Karen, I said. He didn't smile. Agents rarely did. I did anyway. Karen didn't speak. Her face was pale, slack with disbelief. Her carefully constructed aura of power had crumbled. She had lost spectacularly. The passengers watched in awe. As she passed my row, eyes met mine. Fire was back. You have no idea who you're messing with. I will own you, she hissed. I didn't raise my voice. I stated the simple truth. People like me, I said flatly, are the reason people like you get to land safely. Her face faltered. Nothing to argue with. The agents guided her and her partner off the jet bridge. I turned back to the cabin, staying until all passengers deplaned, delivering a clear, factual statement to another agent. The elderly couple whispered thanks. A kid in 4A pressed a pirate sticker into my palm. Temporary, I said. Like fame, his mom added. I nodded. Leah and her crew received my praise. Marcus, a civilian ally, was formally acknowledged. Recognition deserved. Finally, the cabin emptied. I sank into a seat, fatigue settling deep in my bones. Another Tuesday. Another flight. Another mission completed, a buzz from my phone. Dave. Landed yet? How was the flight? I stared at it. Words hovered. You will not believe what just happened. No, that wasn't the job. The job was to remain unseen, a shadow. I typed back simply. Landed uneventful. 3 dots pulsed. Then, row of you, man. A week later, Denver Airport. News screen, her face. Not a heroic tale, arrest, federal charges. Decades possible. Livestream, once her weapon, now Exhibit A. Time-stamped, archived, subpoena-friendly. Her followers turned. Airline revoked status. No upgrades. No service. Faye find her maximum. She had wanted to hurt the airline. Instead, she had ruined herself. Phone away, hoodie up, head back. Ready for the next flight. The world is full of people who think rules don't apply to them, and full of quiet, weary people like me making sure they do.